Excellencies, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Fanis Papathanasiou, journalist with the Public Television of Greece, and I have a pleasure of hosting Mr. George Katrougalos, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece, and currently United Nations independent expert for promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. So he is the right person to talk about the situation in the Middle East, who knows very well the role of the United Nations in crisis, the evolving global order, and of course, the role of Europe in all this situation. Mr. Katrougalos, thank you very much for being here with us. So let's start with the Middle East. How do you assess the situation in the Middle East and the efforts for peace?
Well, one cannot understand what's happening in the Middle East if does not realize that we are living in two interrelated phenomena: the end of the American hegemony and the emergence of a multipolar world. The United States still are the biggest military power in the world, but they cannot impose their will as in the past, because the circumstances have changed dramatically. The other conclusion that we can reach from the conflict is that it is not possible through military means to have permanent diplomatic solutions. In Iran, we knew what we should do because we have already done it with the nuclear agreement, the JCPOA. And it was not just an agreement negotiated between the Americans and the Iranians. It was negotiations in which European diplomacy has played a pivotal role. So to the extent that we are not going back to the fundamentals, the United Nations Charter, the sovereignty and equality among all states, it is not possible to solve any conflict, least this conflict, which is one of the most complicated in the world history.
In the new world order, what's the role of the United States, Russia, China, Europe?
This is maybe the best question in order to understand what's happening. We lived for a while the American moment, Pax Americana. That followed the end of the Cold War, which was a bipolar system. What's happening in a bipolar system? It is a zero-sum game. The gains of the one camp are the losses of the other. The new multipolar order is completely different. It allows countries to have a much more independent policy. It's very characteristic that the Indians, who have been the champions of non-alignment, now they are speaking of multi-alignment. India is a member of BRICS, but it's also a member of Quad, a military alliance bringing together India, United States, Japan, and Australia. The Indonesian Prime Minister has depicted very characteristically this situation, saying that from now on, we are all politically polygamous. And of course, we see the rise of China, but the rise of China does not mean a return to a bipolar world. First of all, because China is not building military blocks. United States have more than 185 military bases. China has just one in Djibouti and not with real military capabilities. But most interestingly, it is that now, not just the middle powers, no country wants just to follow as a vassal any one of the two big, China and the United States. And there is a problem with Europe. Europe should be an independent pole in this new multipolar world. Unfortunately, we have not managed to have our own common voice. In many issues, we will continue to be an accessory of the American foreign policy.
On this new world, can these emerging powers, as you mentioned, play a role in issues, let's say in Iran, in helping, promoting a solution, approaching a solution, can play this role?
But of course, we have seen now the pivotal role of Pakistan, not just in negotiations, but in an emerging Sunni, let's say, camp that includes also Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, eventually Turkey. And it is not just a repetition of, let's say, camps. It is an effort to have a regional understanding of the situation. For the region, one must be clear, without a solution to the Palestinian problem, we cannot have everlasting peace. And again, it is clear that military means do not bring a solution. Israel can win all military battles, but to the extent that it cannot transform into a diplomatic solution these military gains, it is in a much worse diplomatic position than before October 7. Now, 60% of the Americans have a negative view of Israel. It is 70% for the Americans below 30. It is 75% among the voters of the Democrats. So, in the long run, even impressive military performance cannot guarantee political success.
On this new regional power order, as you mentioned, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and emerging other countries like Egypt, what's the role and what will be the balance with Israel? You know, Israel controls a big portion of power in the region. So how this will play? What will be the balance of power?
Well, I am afraid that under the current Israeli government, it is not possible to have a peaceful solution. Prime Minister Netanyahu has invested in what he is doing. Elections are close. Although the camp of peace in Israel has not the power that it had in the past, I remain optimistic, exactly because what I'm saying is just common sense for the region. I'm repeating, what we need for reaching peace and everlasting peace and justice in the area is not sidelining the Palestinian question, as it was the effort in the past of previous American administrations. The two-state solution, although it looks today an utopic dream, it is the only possible way out of this stalemate.
Mm-hmm. On this context, what would be the role of the United Nations? Can the United Nations resolve crises as it used in the past? Can mediate in resolving crises like they did in the past, or just going to have a role only for the human resources?
Yeah. You know, the first General Secretary of the United Nations has said that the role of the organization is not to bring heaven into earth, but to avoid earth becoming hell. And it is true that we have a stalemate at the Security Council, consecutive vetoes, either from the Americans or the Russians and the Chinese. But the United States is not just the Security Council. It is the General Assembly. It is the International Court of Justice, who has issued two major important decisions the last 2 years. One regarding the illegality of the occupation of the Palestinian territories, besides eventual war crimes committed there, the legal authoritarian decision that any perpetuation of the occupation is illegal, and in another level, an important decision regarding the obligations that all states have vis-à-vis climate crisis. And again, do not consider United Nations just with the General Secretary of the Security Council. Francesca Albanese, the Special Rapporteur on the Palestinian territories, is United Nations. World Health Organization is United Nations. Imagine how we could treat pandemics without WHO. And a final point, I said that we are living in a multipolar world, but multipolarity needs multilateralism. Multipolarity needs the United Nations system. Otherwise, it's going to evolve in pure anarchy.
We all understand the views of the Trump administration about the United Nations. How do you see the role of the United Nations evolving in international crisis?
The United Nations, you say again. Look, United Nations act through their organs, but also through the states members. Again, we see efforts to sideline United Nations. For instance, the Board of Peace, this construct of President Trump, is a direct effort to deviate from multilateralism based on the United Nations Charter. President Trump has withdrawn United States from 66 multilateral organizations, 33 of the United Nations, and many others. I think this is another sign of what I called at the beginning of our discussion, the end of the American hegemony. It has been the United States that they have built, among others, but basically, the post-World War II international system. The fact that now are withdrawing from it, it's a clear acceptance that they cannot play this set ruling role that we're playing in the past. And exactly because we do not need a hegemon in order to have an international order, the role of the United Nations now is accentuated. We are working towards this direction. For instance, climate action is a very interesting example. We are going to have the COP31 in Antalya. It's a very interesting division of roles. Turkey is going to preside the summit, but Australia is going to have the negotiation responsibility. And again, this multipolarity, this, let's say, as the Indian Prime Minister has said, politically polygamous character of the international scene is that it gives hope for a better future.
What will be the future of NATO? We understand how the United States view the role of the alliance. What will be the future after this important summit in Ankara?
Well, the future of NATO depends exclusively on what the United States are going to do with it. NATO was always basically an American organization. I would reverse your question in asking what the Europeans can do faced to this new American stance vis-à-vis NATO. And I should be clear, Europeans should build their own defense within European Union structures. The fact that the European leaders are still trying to build European defense within NATO structures, it's another proof that what de Gaulle had set as the basic aim of European unification, European strategic autonomy, is not in sight. Europe is a very important economic power. But Juncker used to say two puns, which are very, very true. First, that there are two categories of European states. Small states and states which have not yet realized that they are small. Any European country is going to be irrelevant in the future, if not within the European structure. And the second thing that Juncker was saying is that Europe is a global payer. We contribute in international aid, but we are not a global player, exactly because we cannot articulate a unique foreign policy. I think that we can, but I must say that the European leadership, it is not still confronting efficiently this goal.
On this new world, what role will have the international law and countries like, we are Greece and some other countries have as main focus on the foreign policy, the international law. So what, on this new world, the Trump administration, the new evolving world order, what role is going to have the international law?
International law is going to be even more pivotal in structural international relations than in the past. Exactly because the multiplicity of players necessitates a concrete framework of rules within the players can interact. And for this reason, we need also a new international law, a more egalitarian one. Global South has already imposed important changes in international law. Look, for instance, the right to self-determination. It is considered now as a given right. It was not included in the United Nations Charter, because at this time, the two colonial empires of France and Great Britain was against it. But the decolonization imposed this right to the two United Nations covenants. So, speaking about international law, we must understand that it is the necessary prerequisite of any international legal order, but we must have also in mind that it is a battlefield. It is not given, it is evolving. And one of the reasons that I'm optimistic about the future, it is exactly because of the influence of the Global South. Globalization entails a much more egalitarian distribution of power in the world. And this economic distribution of power entails also a major shift in political power.
Let's talk now about the role of Europe in the region of the Middle East. Has the political will, has the capability, the European countries, Europe, the European Union, the Commission, to play a role here in the region?
It's a very nice and interesting question. I believe that now Europe plays a much inferior role than, let's say, even 10 years ago. I'm going to give you an example. When President Trump withdrew United States from the nuclear agreement, the JCPOA, we the Europeans tried to neutralize the new sanctions imposed both to Iran and to European enterprises that would continue making business with Iran. We tried to establish a so-called special vehicle, an economic institution trying to help neutralize these sanctions. We were not successful, but we tried to be a player. I have traveled to Tehran in the framework of this project. What do we see now? We see Chancellor Merz to say that Israel is doing the dirty work for us. So a clear negation of international law. He admits that it's a dirty job. He admits that it is contrary to international law, and still it supports it. It is not an accident that Germany lost its bid for becoming a non-permanent member of the Security Council. But Germany is not alone. In this time, maybe it's a hyperbole, an exaggeration, but I think only Spain saves the honor of the European Union. I hope that this is not going to be the final let's say, position of Europe, I continue to be optimistic, exactly because the interests of the big majorities of the European populations are not antithetical, are parallel with the interests of the global South. Inequalities within our societies are becoming now even greater than in the past. And this is the result of the same neoliberal policies that make the global South poorer, and also within our societies, the middle class and the working class losing all these advantages that we had during the golden years of the welfare state.
Finally, about the Greek-Turkish relations, did you try with your counterpart, Mr. Çavuşoğlu, to approach the Greek-Turkish relations, the differences in the Aegean, and do you see any feature in this effort for the two countries to approach the differences?
I had always a very sincere relationship with Mevlut Çavuşoğlu. I consider him a friend. I continue to have discussions with him in framework of different, let's say, dialogue schemes. Still, I cannot speak neutrally in that. I'm Greek. I found especially problematic various aspects of Turkish foreign policy, above all the casus belli. The threat that Turkey is going to go to war with Greece, a decision of the Turkish National Assembly of 1995, is obviously against the United Nations Charter, which forbids not just the use of force, but also the threat of using force. Again, I am optimistic regarding the future of the relations, exactly because the two people feel friendly one to each other. I don't know if you know it, the national leader of Greece, Eleftheros Venizelos, just 8 years after a major defeat we suffered in 1922, he proposed Kemal Atatürk for the Nobel Laureate of Peace, demonstrating that we can have peaceful relations with Turkey. Again, I think the basis is international law. The dispute over the economic maritime zones, which is essentially the difference we have with Turkey, can be solved as a legal matter by legal means, by going to the International Court of Hague. Turkey is adopting a different strategy, being confident of its own force, but exactly because now Turkey is becoming even more than a regional power. They are mediating not just in Ukraine and in the Middle East, in Eritrea and in Ethiopia. I think that for Turkey, that could be a rather peripheral issue that could be resolved and in this way help also Turkey in its international standing. Again, the basis is international law.
Very interesting points. Thank you, Mr. Katrougalos, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Thank you.